Okay, that's the meeting now recording, so I will take this adherent of the Hamilton Area Committee on the 8th of February 2023. I can see that we have present Councillors Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark. Councillor Johnson-Dempsey? No. Also present we have Councillors Devlin, Dewar, Donnelly, Falconer and Handybode. Councillor Horn? No. I have apologies from Councillor Hose. I can see that we also have present Councillors Keat, McCreary, MacDonald. Councillor McGeever? No. I don't see Councillor McLachlan either. I have apologies from Councillor Nelson. Also present is Councillor Razak. I have apologies from Councillor Ross. And present also are Councillors Thompson and Toner. We also have a number of officers in attendance at today's meeting. So with that, I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thanks for that, Elizabeth Ann. Okay. Item 1, declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Item 8, the Mackin Trust. I'm the Chair.
Okay. Noted. Any other declarations? Okay. That's fine. Item 2, recommendations. The committee is asked to approve the following recommendation: that progress regarding the development and community trust.
Sorry, the minutes.
Okay.
Of the previous
We invite John McCafferty, community engagement.
Chair, sorry. We've got the minutes of the previous meeting. Is that approved?
Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, can we have them approved? Agreed. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Items for note: community asset transfer update. And invite John McCafferty, community engagement advisor, to speak to the report. John.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. Yes, members will know that the Council decided to promote community asset transfer. This is part of the process where we're going around to various area committees, and we're also doing some external and internal promotion around it. Just to the background again, that the community asset transfer is one of the legal obligations that kind of spans out of the Community Empowerment Act 2015. So the Council is legally obliged to work with any suitably constituted local community organisations that apply for lease, purchase or other management arrangements for any land or property owned by relevant public bodies. And I do want to stress that it's not just the Council, this also applies to other public bodies like NHS, Lanarkshire, police, etc. And, you know, increasingly this has been quite a rising bit of work, and very fortunately the Council agreed to employ a community asset transfer support officer for a couple of years, and Ian's here and he's going to give a presentation on the process for folks, so if members don't mind saving any questions for after the presentation. In terms of the promotion, we've looked at internal processes, we've revamped the website, it's going to go live very shortly. We've done some training programme, Learn Online, in terms of the community asset transfer, and Ian has been involved in some specific external promotion, particularly around Voluntary Action South Lanarkshire and with the Community Ownership Support Service, the national body to support community asset transfer, and also some real local work relating to SLLC and football clubs. There's a lot of interest for community football clubs in community asset transfer, and we had over 50 individuals at a meeting. To date, we've had 75 organisations this last year interested. 19 of those were from the Hamilton area. We're currently in dialogue with 30 of those. Obviously, not every application goes to fruition, and 5 of those are from the Hamilton area. 2 applications have been submitted and approved in this financial year, and we're expecting another 5 will be submitted in progress before the end of the financial year. One of them is from the Hamilton area. So as I say, if I can now pass on to Ian to run through the presentation.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to present. Over the last 10 months or so, we have focused upon improving how we deal with inquiries and it's fair to say, as John's alluded to, that it's been very busy, lots of approaches. One of the key things that I'm kind of keen to get across is that elected members are aware of the requirements of groups who approach for asset transfer. As John had mentioned previously, any suitably constituted group, and there are specific requirements about membership, local membership and things like that. If there's ever any doubts and anybody approaches you, please refer them to myself or just get in touch with me and I can be clear upon what kind of constitutional issues that are required. So the most important thing is that the legislation entitles any suitably constituted group to apply. So effectively it's incumbent upon the local authority to actually accept that application and look at the merits of it and compare it to our existing use. So the organisations, we cannot tell an organisation not to apply, they are entitled to apply. There are certain instances when process prevents us looking at applications that are received. In the first instance, if the property is already for sale or on the open market, that precludes it. Also, if negotiations are currently taking place over the property, that again precludes it. And the only other circumstance is where there has been a previous similar application for a property over the last 2 years. The authority can consider it, but effectively, legislatively, we can say no for a period of 2 years for similar applications for that landed property. And now, obviously, this is what we've talked about earlier on. They're always entitled to apply if they meet the organisational criteria. We have to agree unless we can basically have reasonable grounds for refusing it. And my role, the key element of my role is that I have to ensure that organisations are capable of delivering the project. Lots of well-intentioned small community groups, but the reality is quite often is the building a land an asset or a liability? Do they have the capability to take it on? So broadly, things are broken down into communities of geography and communities of interest. Communities of geography speaks for itself if that's a number of local people coming together to take over an asset. Communities of interest is where we have organisations such as football clubs that predominantly work within an area, but not all the persons or the members come from that area. It's no doubt that in terms of the process, lease is an easier option for organisations. It's a lower standard, albeit we do require quite robust business plans in most instances. But most of our work is towards lease. It's rarely purchase. And the final thing which is important is that we have to protect our assets, and any organisation which we transfer to, there has to be an asset lock in place so that effectively they cannot take on a property via asset transfer then dispose of it themselves. So that's a key bit of the legislation which prevents misuse of it. So when an organisation comes to us, we have available an asset transfer register. This is a map on the council website that organisations can look at and find suitable properties. They then come to me and I try to endeavour to find out what our current or proposed use is in the future so that I can effectively tell them right away whether there's a merit in them applying. I suppose the broadest and the easiest example is if somebody comes in and looks for a school, they're not going to get a school over their trampoline club or something to that effect. So that's an easy example, but it has to kind of fit. So we provide structural conditions of the properties, previous running costs, and also staff costings, and an estimated valuation for the lease. These are all things that an organisation has to consider. Ultimately, if TUPE were to apply, some organisations couldn't afford to take on staff and their pensions, so things like that are key considerations in terms of groups looking at assets. Obviously, they have all the information and they have that in front of themselves and they can decide whether it's an asset or a liability at the end of the day. Even if it's a liability, some groups want to push forward and that's their right to do so. So one of the things that, I suppose the first thing that I do when groups come to me, and I'm happy that they're suitable, is I stress the need for community engagement and consultation. It's utterly important that the area that the land or property is based in is aware and on board and not pushing against them. So it's an important thing to do this. Now, I'll give you an example. There's an application in Stewartfield for a badminton club to take over the facility, and they held a community event. They've done consultations. They've spoke to all the groups on the site to say, we want to work with you. So you're basically doing your groundwork to prove that you're fitting in with the community's needs and not opposing them. Obviously, part of the process is that they draft feasibility or business plans and produce basic information or drawings to outline their plans. They also have to consider things such as planning requirements. I had discussions this morning about a group that are looking at land, and there may be planning requirements. There may have to be trees that they want to remove. That may be an issue. So there's lots of kind of background work to be done before it's suitable. Finally, obviously, it's incumbent upon the group to fundraise. We will pass over properties in the state they're in, and it's up to the group to basically find the funding generally to bring that building up to state. So once the process is engaged, effectively, we cannot negotiate with any other parties until the conclusion of that process. So it locks the process. Once it's validated, it's a 6-month process, which we have to follow legislatively. What we look at when we get applications is the best value. What will that project do to add community benefit? We look at basically how much that is going to impact upon our services and provision, and we obviously look at valuations and things like that as well, but we have to provide a case against their application, which is really the key part of this. So that is our process there. We validate an application, we put an entry on the planning portal to allow local people to have their say during a certain period. Then the organisation has a right to reply. We then look at the best value, what the actual property is going to offer, and give it a score. The score can impact upon the valuation. So, for instance, if the community benefit is significant, the property may be eligible for peppercorn or low rent. If it's not, then there may be a percentage. So we agree that in-house. This information is then forwarded to the CAT panel, which is a number of senior personnel within the authority, who thereafter approve or decline the application, and then finally this is put in front of the Housing and Technical Committee for approval. As I said earlier on, there's a 6-month period allocated by legislation, and given the fact that we have to try and align with committees and various other things, it's quite an intense 6 months to gather information, put it all into a report and push it through the relevant stages. If we don't meet the 6 months, we can ask the community group to extend, and it's at their discretion whether they approve that or not. Appeals and reviews. If once we make a decision, a group is entitled to ask us for a review. A review is done internally via elected members who can thereafter uphold or overturn the decision. Thereafter, if this is refused, the organisation has a right to appeal to the Scottish Government, who will thereafter look at all the circumstances and make a decision from there. So effectively, I scrutinise applications, identify council usage, try to provide information to the organisations on the baselines of that property, act as a conduit with colleagues in property and to try to basically increase the flow of that. I try to assist applications, organisations with completion of applications, but really what we try to do there is rely upon partner agencies like VASLAN and COS and the Accelerate programme. These are other organisations that can provide that support, because effectively it's fair to say I'm juggling a number of inquiries just now, and I've got about 30 plus organisations that could go through CAT over the next couple of years. So We produce an annual report which goes to the Scottish Government to analyse performance. We have improved the website, it's going online soon. We've done an animation which kind of helps to take across the information, and we have done the training. All of these things are to try and bring our internal staff up to understanding the legislation, so that if there are approaches, they understand what the requirements are. Engagement is pretty positive, it's continual, and lots of inquiries with regards to halls just now. I think obviously there's a lot of chatter about halls and the future of community halls, so this is certainly something that's becoming very relevant. And that concludes. Please, as I say in the first instance, contact me if you get any questions in future if a group approaches you. I'm happy to basically interact with groups from an early stage, but I'll open myself up to questions if anybody has any.
Thanks for that, Ian. Have we any questions or comments?
Thompson.
Ross, sorry.
Councillor Thompson was first.
Sorry. Bert?
Thank you. Just some clarity and reassurance. These community assets, when they go, we're not building, we're not replacing them. What happens to the groups in there? What guarantees have they got that they'll be guaranteed their meetings, their activities, etc.? What guarantees they've got that the new group coming in, obtaining the community asset transfer, that they don't put the prices up? Have we any say in that once they get that, about the costs, etc., or the employment, and indeed, as you mentioned, pensions and that for people that work there, and employment? What sort of protections have we got for people that are there?
Legislatively, there isn't anything that enforces a group going through asset transfer to work with existing provision in that authority, in the facility. They could, legislatively, they could. However, our process, or what I very much do from the first instance, is basically connect groups, and so every instance where we have a live transfer that I've been involved in, they have spoken to the existing providers, and they have looked at options to include them moving forward and not displace them. So that's something. But legislatively, if the application is approved, the group are given a repairing and maintenance lease, and they then are entitled to basically use that premises as to their ends.
What I say to me, but virtually no protection for existing groups. Once somebody comes in, if my group I'm involved with took over a hall, they can then decide the charges, etc. The other groups might not be able to meet. They might decide on the employment, etc. So what happens with there? There's no protection. That's basically what you're saying. You're just working in goodwill, really, aren't you?
I haven't pressed again, I do apologise. There isn't anything legislatively to basically enforce that. However, it's certainly good practice to do so, and I do that, because I think it would be really quite wrong to basically displace groups that are in existing facilities. The most recent example I can give you, Councillor, is the application for Stuartfield that I talked about earlier on. They have engaged every single group within that venue with a view to either saying we can accommodate you, or if we can't accommodate you, how do we work with you to sort you with other solutions. But legislatively, there isn't anything to enforce a group to do that.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I appreciate your honest answer there. It does remain a bit concerned with me. I would have liked to have thought whoever it be, whether the Scottish Government and the local authority, had put something in to protect existing groups. It's all about equality and fairness as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure my colleague as well. Until that time, we're depending on goodwill. In my life, people a lot of the time will say one thing, and then they'll tell you how to live without it. It's just a wee bit maybe scepticism. But thanks for your answer.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for that report, and thanks for the presentation. It was really useful. My question's in relation to, on page 10, 6.2, it talks about the event that's happened with SLC, the SFA, and individuals representing community football clubs. I would just like to ask, how successful do we think that's been? Has there been, has that generated any further interest or as to what was already there? And is there any learning we can take from the running of that event for future events?
Thanks for that. It's a good question. the reason that event came about was because I was receiving probably an undue amount of inquiries from football clubs, and we have a finite amount of football pitches in the authority. And what we're trying to do there was to encourage a more joined up approach with football clubs not competing for pitches, but actually trying to work together. And there are examples that are coming down the line where I actually have managed to basically get groups that want to work together. What we were trying to basically say there as well was, if we do this in a more joined up and professional manner, we meet the criteria that the SFA set, we can access SFA funding for pitches and development. So there has been a number of inquiries that have came forth from that. I think there's a greater understanding and process, and I anticipate that there will be a number of robust applications over the next 6 months to a year for the pitches in the area. The fact remains we still have to basically have pitches available for general availability. We can't not do that. But there are a number, certainly, as I say, a fairly large number of will go to application over the next year.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McCreary.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to also thank Ian for his presentation. So I'm very much in favour of cats where they're very appropriate. It's better to have things saved, like a library, for example, rather than in code. You know, so in principle, I think it's a good idea. So it's not a negative. I don't want this to be taken negative, but let's say it didn't work. Let's say after a period of time, and let's take out a Hamilton, let's go down to Clydesdale and say there was a library there that went into a cat. And it failed through funding, or they didn't get the staff, or didn't get the take up. What would happen? Would it revert back to being a library again? Would the council take it back on, or would it be just left to drift into closure?
I'm afraid that obviously I can't confirm what would happen, but effectively the property would come back into the management of the authority, and thereafter the decision as to how it would be used or disposed of would be made at obviously a senior officer level. What the key thing is that we're endeavouring to try to make sure applications don't fail, and this is why sometimes the standard of information we require is a little bit higher. We try to get it right in the first instance. We try to make sure there's support there. But you're right, there could be occasions where groups, through things change, times change. But no, all I can say from my point of view is it comes back to the authority.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for that. Councillor Keith.
Thanks, Chair, and again, thanks, Ian, for your very informative presentation. I very much welcome the measures and moves you've taken to improve the process. Having been contacted by an organisation in my area of Hamilton, a scout group, I understand that the process is not always smooth and seamless. In fact, there can be a lot of hurdles in the way, especially a lot of legalities, having consultation from legal representatives, etc. I was CC'd into some correspondence and I had not a clue what was going on. I know Councillor Toner could probably testify to some of that. So I very much welcome the measures to improve the process. Just on the website in particular, how do we advertise the community asset transfer scheme? Like, how do we engage with the community? Say this is something that you can do. How do we get that out about? Thank you.
Thanks for that. And yeah, there are challenges in the legislation and working with groups, you're right. But we're nearly there with that one, I hasten to add, so that's a positive. A lot of what I have done is basically be visible. I attend all the local networks. I have strong relationships with probably some of the key organisations out in the community. The fact remains that there is still a difficulty in bringing community asset transfer from deprived communities due to capability, due to other barriers. And this is the thing that I suppose we continue to work on with other agencies, but we're still not there with it. We quite often find that it's the people that are most capable that will lead to CAT. And there's a lot of kind of hand-holding needs to be done at the bottom end. And I think everybody recognises that these communities would benefit from CAT if they could be brought up to the capability to do so. So word of mouth as well. I field at least 2 or 3 inquiries a week. When John had given you the figures earlier on of 70, that's the groups that I think are tangible. I get inquiries virtually every 2 or 3 days from groups that don't understand the legislation or perhaps don't understand, you know, what it really means. So it's pretty steady.
Thanks for that. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again, Ian. And you'll not be able to get out that door because your head will be so big with all the compliments you're getting today. However, on that very point, is it possible to the slides that you provided on the screens just now, would that be possible that you could send them to all the councillors, please? It's very handy to have, and especially when we're questioned at various groups, we can always refer to them. So is that possible? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that, because part of what I want to do is make it easier for you guys, because I'm conscious that you do field a lot of inquiries, usually inquiries that are quite often very early embryonic stages. So yes, we'll definitely get the slides out. That would be fabulous.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other questions, comments? Thanks very much for that, Ian and John. The committee agree to note the report? Agreed. Thank you. Item 4, Participatory Budget Education Resources Pupil Equity Fund. Jacqueline Wallace to speak to the paper.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, councillors and colleagues. As I said, my name is Jacqueline Wallace. I'm the Quality Improvement Manager with CQIS Education with strategic responsibility for equity. And I'm here to represent my colleague Laura Mitchell, who's a lead officer with specific responsibility for participatory budgeting. So I may apologise in advance if I don't know all the answers, but we'll do our best. But thank you for the opportunity to join you this afternoon and give a short update on participatory budgeting across our Hamilton schools. Schools continue to work hard to roll out their PB plans and to ensure a full spend of their PB budget by the end of March, in line with their planned outcomes and measures that are already set. And I know you'll have in advance the appendices that will hopefully be helpful to you to outline how the spend is progressing. And you'll see that from Appendix 1 outlines the total spend for the Hamilton area of £196,007.25, and that is roughly 5.4% of the total budget in terms of their PEFs monies for the schools within Hamilton, and the total for that is £3,656,910. Big numbers here, isn't there? So in Appendix 2, it shows that the majority of schools have allocated the 5%, which is the minimum amount that they must do in terms of participatory budgeting. And this is common across all localities, so Hamilton is no different from our others in terms of our presentations. But 4 schools within Hamilton have allocated 10%, which is obviously that increased amount, and that's Mackinhill, Newton Farm, Woodhead and Hamilton School for the Deaf have actually allocated 14%, which is considerably above their 5% commitment. And then Appendix 4, as you'll see, outlines the categories of spend. And as you can see, educational excursions continues to be the most popular area for spend. As schools now have that opportunity post-COVID to be able to engage more with their learners and give them that opportunity to be, to take up the extended opportunities for their learning. And it's positive also to see that outdoor learning as an area of spend for our schools. Again, this offers increased opportunities for learners to broaden their learning experiences in line with the expectations of Curriculum for Excellence. And then finally, you'll have Appendix 5, which outlines the votes and the distribution in terms of the participatory budgeting process. And again, positive to see the increased volume of voting across our schools. And this exemplifies the real partnership work that is and opportunities is brought about by the PB process and is very positively received within our schools. This is year 2, as you will know, and it continues to have that degree of success. And we've obviously built on our practices and our lessons learned from year 1 as well. So further information will now be collected from the schools at the end of March, at the end of their spend, and then another update will be available to you following that. But for the moment, that's the update for today. So thank you for your time for listening to that, I know, rather brief presentation, but please feel free to ask any questions and I'll do my best to respond to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Any questions, comments? Councillor Keat.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for that report. And well done for standing in, Laura. Presumably short notice. Just two questions. If the PB budget isn't spent by the 23rd of March, what happens to that money? And secondly, on the educational excursions, which the budget can be used for, can that be used to meet transport costs to and from the excursion?
Is potentially the easiest. So yes, in terms of transport, that would include that within the budget. So they would be able to use that there. Obviously, PB has a particular focus on closing the gap. So it is about our children within 7D 1 and 2 plus FME. So we would absolutely be encouraging schools to use that, but the target and the focus should be those children most in need in terms of reducing that cost, and that's in line with our cost of the school day policies and practice that we wish to adopt as well. So in terms of the first question, you know, although absolutely the deadline in a sense is the end of March, but there is that small rollover period, if you like, into the end of June. So long as it's encouraged full spend by the end of March, but absolutely by the end of June, it has to be full spend by the end of June. And that's in line again with Scottish Government proposals for all of the pupil equity funding, as well as our strategic equity fund as well.
Okay. That's it.
Can I just come back on the first point? So for talking sake, if a school is in a position, which is unlikely, that they don't allocate their PB budget by the end of June, is there an option for schools to carry that on to the forthcoming year?
There's always an exceptional circumstance, as you can imagine. So you're right, in the first year we didn't have anybody that was in that position. Through our own monitoring and tracking, we don't expect that should be an issue again this year, because schools do submit it as part of their profile of spend to us for their whole spend in terms of their pupil equity fund. So we do keep that monitoring, you know, across the year. So it is very unlikely it would happen, but if it did, you know, and you're right, there's always that potential, then we can certainly, you know, we can speak to Scottish Government and our attainment advisor to ask and see if there's an exceptional circumstance that could be supported. Quite often that might be something to do with procurement. If you know, if something they're obviously trying to have an acquisition in some kind and that's not been possible, or it might be to do with some kind of recruitment issues. So that there are ways that sometimes that might have to be extended, but it's not happened as yet. Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you for that very in-depth report that you gave. I would just like to compliment the kids that all stepped up to the plate. I don't think we can forget them. I did take the opportunity to go to schools that I cover, and I did hear their participatory budget and options that they were voting on, and I was amazed. We politicians in the making. They were absolutely, they would put us to shame. Quite frankly, they were fantastic. So the education system's definitely working in terms of getting them empowered to have their say and participate. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Mary. Jacqueline, just a question I've got, and I noticed John Ogilvie's on there. In the participatory budget for the Hull House area, John Ogilvie swept the boards and they took three £2,000 grants, which were voted on. And the figures they had were 600, 640 and 610. And they took £6,000 away for the participatory budget in Hull House, and yet they've still got another opportunity elsewhere, while community groups in Hull House didn't receive funding. Are you involved in that?
No, unfortunately, I wouldn't know anything about that part of the process. I'm afraid we're not involved in that. We just work within the Scottish Government guidelines, and the schools are then asked to obviously decide on their own allocation in terms of what they want to spend with PB. So if there are other areas that they have had money allocated to, or how they might do that, that would be down to the schools themselves to potentially look at that. So it wouldn't be something I could comment on, sorry. But I could certainly take it back if there's something you would want to find out more about.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
John wanting to come in on that.
John?
And thank you, Chair. No, hopefully I can answer on that. And obviously the PEF funding that has been talked about has got separate criteria and is completely focused on school-related activities of pupils, etc. Whereas the place-based PB programme that is funded through the council separately obviously is open to that community. And I know we've had discussions, Chair, about the fact that because John Ogilvie is in the actual catchment area, whereas the neighbouring schools are not. They have got an advantage to get access to some of that community PB funding, but you know, as you've seen, luckily we had a much greater pot this year because of the additional funding from the council and some of the lottery funding that we secured. So basically, everybody that applied for funding in that area got the funding. There was a couple of applications that really didn't meet the key criteria, so we're working with them to look at other avenues for funding. But I would just stress that the funding, the place-based funding, was very much about community activity, and the schools are obviously applying for activity that is in that community. So we are, I think I said at the last area committee meeting, we are looking at refining those processes and making sure that other schools aren't disadvantaged if they're not physically in the catchment area, and we're looking to refine those PB processes.
Thanks for that, John. The reason it does highlight it, as you quite rightly say, John Ogilvie's in that area. It's the only secondary school in that area, but that means that 73% of our secondary school pupils have no participation in the budget in that area. And it's something we really need to look into. And thanks for that comment anyway. Mary, you?
Yeah, just on that. As John eloquently outlined, that was OPOP, our place, our plan. And also I would like to say that the applications that made application, the groups that made application, that was the community that voted. So we have to go with the requests of the community. The community voted for who was to get the break-up of that money. So me as an elected official would not want to go against my constituents. And I had to honour, and I would honour that. And I think the way that it was managed, I have to take my hat off to the workers that managed that process to make sure it was up and above board and very, very professional, Alan.
Well, as a local member and also somebody that stays in the area, I've got to say I'm quite shocked that the school's voting was all 600 and the rest of the community groups were all under 150. It doesn't take a brainstorm to know how they've done it at school. And I have no objections to the school getting that, because my grandchild goes to the school. But I think we need to have a wee look into that, because we're secondary pupils, 73% of them are being excluded from it because they're not at John Ogilvie. Anybody else? Comments? Questions? Sorry? That's it? Fine. Okay. Committee agree to note the report? Okay. Item 5, participatory budget, housing and technical resources. Claire Frew to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to present a short report for noting on the housing and technical resources contribution to the Council's participatory budgeting programme, building on the updates provided to committee previously, and you'll find the update on pages 25 and 26 in your papers. So the report sets out participatory budgeting in relation to the estate improvement budget. And just by way of background, that's a budget that consists of a total of £40,000 and it's split evenly across the 4 housing divisions. This is a budget that was nominated for participatory budgeting because it's well suited to respond quickly to a range of maybe smaller projects in line with the priorities highlighted by tenants. So during 2022-23, £3,109.20 has been spent in the Hamilton division making improvements to the bin areas in the industrial estate area of Blantyre following feedback and comments from tenants. The work consisted of removing all of the old bin chutes and installing new bins in line with the requests that had been made. So that came to a total of just over £3,000 out of that estate improvement budget for Hamilton. But I would also note that plans are underway to spend the remainder of that estate improvement budget. And we checked in with the area housing managers who've advised that that money will be spent on installing fencing at the back courts of Larkfield Court and Blantyre. And this is in response to tenant feedback and comments on antisocial behaviour, security and privacy issues due to the fact that the space between the blocks is open plan and a number of concerns had been raised there. So the remainder of the estate improvement budget will be targeted here in response to those local concerns raised by tenants through the area housing offices. So this means that the Hamilton's full allocation from the estate improvement budget has been allocated in line with tenant priorities. 1/3 of that has already finalised and been spent, and the remainder is in the works. And finally, I would draw your attention to an additional project undertaken in Lark Hall using the planned maintenance budget. While this is not one of Housing's designated budgets for participatory budgeting, housing managers again responded to tenant feedback about safety issues by making improvements to the lighting at Anne Bank Street in Lark Hall at a cost of £3,865.71. So this means that over the course of the year, the full estate improvement budget is allocated for, plus this additional almost £4,000. So officers from Housing and Technical Resources will continue to take forward opportunities to help determine the outcome of spending across the relevant budget areas, and also identify additional areas where we think we can use the principles of participatory budgeting, and continue to provide further updates to the committee in due course. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for that report. I'd just like to welcome the work that's going on in Lark Hall, and mentions about the improvements to lighting at Anne Bank Street. I think it helps us show the positive working power of PB and community engagement, and it's just a really good example of that, and I hope to see more of that kind of thing coming along, so thank you.
Councillor Devlin.
Chair. Claire, thanks for the report. I'll tell you what it is. Bothwell and Uddingston fall under Blantyre. How do you engage with I haven't a clue. I don't know of how you engage with the community of Bothwell and Uddingston for the participating budget as part of this.
Thank you for the question, and it is a really important question about how we get to as many people as possible. There's a number of ways, some formal, some informal, just how we respond. So first of all, we do our annual rent setting consultation, so all tenants have, wherever they are in South Lanarkshire, have the opportunity to tell us about their priorities for how they would like to see different budgets used. So we can get a wide range of information that way. Other than that, we will use local housing forums. Our housing managers will have a look at basically what are people phoning up and asking them about, what are they seeing complaints about, what are they seeing concerns raised about, or anything like that. So they'll have a look at things raised there. So it can be at that quite high level, kind of people looking ahead and making notes through a survey form, or it could be anything from, you know, those local engagement networks. It could be through a state walkabout. So that staff will do and pick up anything there. So we try to provide a range of ways, but also always keen to find as many more ways as we can that people can have their voices heard and we can respond to those priorities.
I have to say, Claire, that I would love to know what the responses were. Could you give me the figures back from the people from the Ward 16, Bothwell and Uddingston? Because even to go to the housing forum, the residents from Bothwell and Uddingston will not go over to Blantyre. And I have asked for these forums to, you know, even to go round the different areas, and the ones from Blantyre are refusing to come. The other aspect is I used to go to the housing forums, but it now clashes with one of our committees. And I was basically told, well, that's just your tough. So really, even as elected members, we can't engage with it to find out exactly what's going clear. And I think that's an area that really has to be looked at with regard to Bothwell and Uddingston. I'm sure my two colleagues will agree. I could be wrong, but it's actually no disrespect to the people of Blantyre, and I do understand, but I just feel as though there is absolutely no participation at all in Bothwell and Uddingston. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Devlin. I'll come back to you on that.
Councillor Stewart.
Again, thanks, Claire, for the report. It's not really a question, it's more just a comment. I'm just welcoming that there's been much participation from the residents in the industrial estate area of Blantyre, which lies within Ward 17, and on their feedback, just over £3,000 was spent on improving the bin areas. So thanks for that.
Claire? Take your time. Claire, you wish to come in?
No, I was just going to respond just very quickly to say thank you for that comment, and just to say that's one of the reasons why the estate improvement budget is a useful one to use for a PB approach. I'm trying to stop saying participatory budgeting so many times because it's really difficult, so I try to not keep tripping over it, but that's why it's one of the ones, because you can get some comments and feedback and you can respond quite quickly. It's not one that's one of the big bureaucratic budgets that you have to respond to, and it feels quite immediate as a response for people, so it's one that I'm glad you're able to see the benefit of us doing that. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, you wish to come in?
Aye, thanks, Chair. I've seen milk turn quicker. Anyway, listen, I know it is a bit nutty, but still, listen, talking about that there, participative budgets, we've got one just now, Maureen, Mo and myself, we've been in the state walkabouts. It was agreed 2.5 years ago for work at verandas in a certain area, and they set up a association, and really good attendance, really good participation. People came for the council, the housing and technical, and they told they'll bin this week. It's now 2.5 years and it's still not happened. So when we promise things, can we make sure it actually happens? Because we're now going to be getting some negative feedback, which I'm disappointed, because usually housing is positive feedback. And I'll need to go then, and you'll all be happy here.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Thompson. Councillor McCreary.
Right. Thanks, Chair. Just to support Councillor Devlin's comments, I don't know if Claire's taken an action away to go and see if she can change the date, the day or the time of that Blantyre meeting, because it clashes with something. I think it's full council meeting or maybe the executive or something, but we just can't attend it, and we did attend it in the past. So, Claire, could you do that? I mean, is that something you can go back and have a look at, please?
Thanks, Councillor McGreevy. Yeah, I'll take it back to my colleagues in the area offices who are looking to set different dates for different meetings and just provide that feedback. And we'll see if we can get things changed around. I'm not sure everything's entirely set in stone, so I'm sure we can try and move things around, and we'll let you know. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Chalmers.
Thanks, Chair. It's a wee bit repetitive, but it's just to support what Councillor Devlin McCreary was saying. I think it's actually coincides with today's meeting. I think it's the Hamilton Area Committee, so none for the Blantyre Bother Luddingston Housing Forum. And again, I've raised it a couple of times and there's never been any attempt to try and change it to sit with us. So hopefully, if Claire's got all our message, we can get something done. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Devlin.
She's gone.
She's gone. Okay, just before Henry, Claire, you mentioned earlier about contacting all the tenants and the housing. I mean, communication at all the services is kind of lax at times. And I had suggested before, we contact every household in South Lanarkshire once a year with a council tax notification. And if we put an appropriate thing to say, do you want to be involved in future things? This is how you contact. As I say, every household in South Lanarkshire gets contacted at that time. Okay. No further questions. Committee agree to note the report? Agreed. Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Item 6, update in the town centre, pages 27 to 30. Ian Ross, Project Manager, to speak to the report. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Anyone doesn't know me, as Chair said, I'm Ian Ross from the Enterprise and Sustainable Development Service with an overall responsibility for the town centres across South Lanarkshire. We've been asked by a number of members across all areas to provide updates on town centres. So this is the first in what will become a series of regular updates to the area committees. And it's intended just to be an introductory report at this stage, and obviously as we move through that cycle we can move into more detail. More generally, we report to community and enterprise in terms of some of the more strategic stuff or the funding that affects all all across South Lanarkshire, and I know a number of members will have been included in or involved, sorry, in those meetings. So Section 3 of the report essentially just takes through some of the background of the challenges that all town centres are facing, and how we are looking to address some of those. The way in which people engage in their town centres has changed significantly, but there's still a very strong desire across all the communities for the town centres to be the best they can be, and continue to thrive. At 3.5, we note that the town centres are defined within the local plan, and we use that hierarchy of town centres to set out the work that we are doing. So there are 3 strategic town centres, 7 other designated town centres, and 29 other neighbourhood and village centres, although I think they're now called places rather than neighbourhoods and villages. We have pulled together a series of town centre strategies and action plans, and at section 3.6 it notes the strategies that are now in place. We are looking at a number of other strategies to complement them and continue to work through that cycle. At the 3.7 and 3.8, we touch on some of the more strategic work that we're looking at the longer town centre visioning approach for South Lanarkshire over a 10-year horizon, and what that work would look like, or what our town centres will be looking like over that horizon, and what we should be doing in the interim to ready for that. The other key piece of work is the transition to net zero, which aligns with government and national objectives of working to net zero, and understanding what the challenges around town centres in its widest sense are, whether that be transportation, the businesses, communities, and so on. So turning to section 4, within the Hamilton area there are 3 designated town centres as defined within that local plan structure, which are Hamilton, Blantyre and Lark Hall. There are obviously or many other neighbourhood and centres that the members will be interested in. However, the report touches on the work around Hamilton, where we are now 5 years into, or nearly 5 years into, the existing town centre strategy, which was presented to the Community and Enterprise Committee in October 2018. We have now begun the process of refreshing that, the intervening period with not least COVID, but the changing behaviour of customers, and the way in which occupiers are using town centres has changed. So I say we've begun to refresh that process, and we anticipate bringing an updated draft to the Community and Enterprise Committee before the summer recess. The other thing that's actually not contained in the report, but we should have mentioned, is that the Business Improvement District in Hamilton was successful with their renewal ballot in, I think it was October of last year, and that's given them a further 5-year mandate to keep the good work that they're involved with moving forward. The Blantyre Strategy and Action Plan was approved by the Community Enterprise Committee in October last year, and again I know a number of members were involved in that process. The next stage for us as officers is to get into the delivery phase, and that will be starting or continuing in the very near future. Finally, we touched on the work in Lark Hall. Again, they were roughly a year ahead of that process, and their strategy and action plan was approved in May 2021, and on the back of that they've been successful in drawing down funding from the town centre funds and the place-based investment programme, setting out improvements to the property at the lighthouse, improving some of the streetscape in the kind of softer aspects of the streetscape, and carrying out feasibility work for ambitions around a market space in the King Street area. So as it notes there, they're close to completing that initial phase, and they're bringing forward a number of other projects for future phases. That probably covers the report. So through yourself, Chair, I'm more than happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thanks for that, Ian. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that report. My question is 4.5 Lark Hall. I'd like to welcome and give a shout out to the really good community work and community leadership that's going on in Lark Hall and the way they've shaped, you know, the town centre plan and everything else that's going on in that area and in the wider community. We've got some great community organisations that kind of set an example for other areas. My specific question, though, is are you able to give an update to the pedestrianisation of King Street? What stage are we at with that and what are the next steps in that? Thanks.
Yeah, we officers from my team had a meeting with all the interested groups in Lark Hall just a few weeks ago, and as you'll know, YMCA, the growers, and a housing association have got interest in a variety of projects in the town centre, and as is always the challenge, funding is limited. So through that meeting, the groups are prioritising the projects in terms of which order they would bring them forward and how the delivery might work, and also exploring other opportunities for funding to see if some of them can be run in parallel. There was, I know there's a request for a meeting with the growers group around King Street in the diary. I think it was. They're hoping it for next week. I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, but that would then take the feasibility and start those discussions with colleagues in a number of services, including planning and roads, as to how that's taken forward. So I don't have an exact time scale yet, but rest assured we are closely engaged with the groups and supporting them through that process of securing funding in the right phased approach to deliver their wider ambitions.
Thank you. It's good to see that there's movement on it and progress soon as well. Thank you.
Councillor Keat.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Ian, for your report. Just on paragraph 3.1 that describes the nature of town centres as transitional, that may well be accurate and true in relation to some town centres, but in my own opinion, it certainly doesn't reflect Hamilton Town Centre, which is in a dire state of decline and has been for several years. Most recently, the town centre suffered another blow with the loss of Cadzow Street Post Office, again another vacant building in our town centre, and it was a much needed amenity for many of our elderly members of the community. I of course value the work of the bid in promoting and attracting business, but I really think the updated town centre strategy, which I welcome, needs to reflect the scale of the decline if we are to make any headway with this. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm not surprised with a number of those comments. I think what I would maybe respond is that as part of the process that we're going through for the refresh strategy and action plan is to look at what we said 5 years ago and what success or otherwise we've had in delivering on that plan. And I would never sit here and say that we had achieved everything that we set out to do, but the amount of success is considerable. As examples, we've seen the redevelopment of the Town Hotel site on Townhead Street, which was a key issue for feedback through that initial consultation. We've seen the development of the Hamilton Advertiser building. We've seen proposals brought forward for the Vogue. There are proposals for the Santander building. There are proposals for the Baird unit, and I appreciate that is probably a challenging one that the members are still frustrated around. I suppose really all I'm emphasising that there have been a number of successes. Quarry Street level of occupancy is far greater than it was at the time we did the previous report. But you're absolutely right, there are some key areas of challenge that remain in the town centre, predominantly focused around the Regent Centre, so the section from the former Bairds down to the entrance to the Regent Centre and the centre itself. And we are fully engaged with the owners of the Regent Centre around what their future plans for that are and how the council can play a full and active role in that. So I do take your points. We are continuing to work hard. Through this next process, we are keen that the members and the public are able to set out what these next phase of key priorities, whether they be sites or initiatives, what they are moving forward. but we're acutely aware that there are a couple of key challenges within the town centre that need to be addressed as early as possible.
You want to come back in?
I know I certainly welcome the likes of the Premier Inn and some of the other recent developments, but the likes of Beards that you've mentioned, that's lay dormant for years, I believe. And as you mentioned, the Regent Centre as well, that's actually got superficial shop fronts on it rather than actual shop suppliers or any amenities in the centre. So whereas I welcome the improvements, I think we do have a considerable long way to go. And I'm not naive to the current state of affairs in town centres. It's not just isolated to Hamilton, but Hamilton used to be bustling, thriving, and it is the focal point for our town centre, particularly the area I represent. And it's the first bit you see when you drive into Hamilton, come to the likes of Motherwell, Larkhall, etc. And I think in comparison to Larkhall, it really is dismal. It's night and day to Larkhall. A lot of my constituents say, oh, Larkhall's brilliant, it's bustling. You've got that town centre, there's a lot going on, and you look at Hamilton. I know, do you know what I mean? But I value the work we're doing, but I think there's a long way to go. Just on the Beards site, do we have any updates on that?
I suppose, knowing I was coming to this meeting, I have been, I've been chasing. Hopefully, all the members know that it is owned by Wetherspoons, and they assure us that they have plans to bring that forward. I was pressing them as recently as lunchtime today as to for a timescale for that. They haven't been able to give me a timescale for that, which quite frankly makes me slightly nervous, but I am not told that they are not proposing to go forward.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Dewar.
Thanks, Ian, for your report. Obviously, I'm aware of the stuff that Gavin's brought up. I know through the bid there's lots of stuff going on to for the town centre. So, in terms of the questions, at this early stage, in terms of the actual review of the town centre strategy, can I ask, can you advise who's involved in terms of the key stakeholders and any community groups and organisations that you're going to be involved? And secondly, if it can be advised which areas of the plan have been identified as requiring updating?
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the process that we use for the strategies and action plans is becoming fairly well used. As I say, we've been through 4 have now been put in place. Hamilton we're refreshing, and we're looking at Rutherglen at the same time. In terms of consultation, what we generally do is we prepare a draft document as a discussion document, but the consultation will be full and wide. So we will consult with the bid, we'll consult with all the relevant or key stakeholders in the town, and the intention is that we present a consultative draft, as we term it, to committee this side of the summer recess, and use that summer period for a full public consultation. So it will be online. We generally hold in-person sessions. Last time round we had a number of day sessions in the Regent Centre and got quite a lot of feedback, and I can't remember the exact figures, but we were well into 4 figures of feedback from community representatives. So through that process, obviously more widely with all the members, through that combined process, we hope that we'll get to a point where we are fully reflecting the concerns of members, the community, the businesses, and any other stakeholders within the town. And sorry, in terms of what parts of it, we're kind of everything. You know, nothing. You know, we're starting from the point of we said this. What have we achieved, but also what's changed in the interim? And as I say, whether that's through commercial side of things, whether it's through the impacts of COVID, the way people use their town centres, so all the other challenges, nothing is off the table in terms of how we review that strategy and action plan.
Okay, thanks for that. Any further? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, a lot of what I'm going to say is basically been said earlier. I know so many people from Hamilton who are absolutely disgusted with the state of the town, and I can't blame them. Fortunately, I'm in Larkhall, but people used to go to Hamilton on a Saturday. They would go there for a day out because the shops were better. And it's very much the same in Wishaw and Motherwell. Motherwell certainly taken over from what was in Wishaw, but that's North Lanarkshire's problem. Anyway, the Bairds or Wotherspoons unit and that entire stretch down where we've got these facades, they're falling off now. You know, they're all peeling off. The place looks as if, you know, if Tumbleweed went down there, nobody would be in the least bit sad. I mean, I know that's harsh to say, but I don't think anybody would be surprised, you know, if that actually happened. You know, the Regent Centre, again, was very bustling. And, I mean, I remember it before it even had the roof on it. And it was always a bustling centre. You walk through there now and you can hear your feet. You know, it is so empty. But then if you go on to Quarry Street, there's so many shops empty. And it's such a shame. You come into Lark Hall, and I think right now we might have 2 shops empty. I don't know what it is. I'll tell you the biggest problem we have in Lark Hall is parking, the lack of parking. Parking is a huge issue. And we've had our parking attendants have visited us last week on numerous occasions, so there must be easy culprits up there. But we certainly have a lack of parking there. Anyway, getting back to, I am really concerned about what's happening. I'm concerned about Wotherspoons, if they're ever going to do anything. And I know that we don't own the Regent Centre. However, it would be good to know if you can come back to us maybe later on in the year and give us an update with what's happening in the Regent Centre and the Wotherspoon Centre in particular. Thank you.
All fair comments. Again, just hopefully to give you some reassurance, we are engaged with the owners of the Regent Centre. We are I was going to say encouraging. We're more than encouraging them to look at what the future of the centre is. They recognise themselves that something needs to change. In years gone by, it's all been about backfilling. You know, somebody leaves, you put another tenant in. I think everybody's recognised that we've got to the point where we can't continue to do that, and we need to do something a bit more strategic. And those are the conversations that are being had. We don't have the outcome of those yet, but I take your point that yes, commitment to come back to a future meeting with that kind of information, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Razak.
Ian, I feel for you because a lot of the issues that have been highlighted is down to business rent, which is out with council control, and also business rates, which is out with council control. And the biggest problem is the cost of doing business in those areas is the highest. And when you're speaking about Lark Hall, they're all self-sufficient and their rents are set accordingly. But when you're in the town centre, they're on a higher rateable value and everything else. All that needs to be sorted before Ian can get any leeway or any headway in that. The other thing is we need to bring housing into there. So we need to put houses in there and social houses, if possible, in the town centre above the shops. And that would do it as well, and also small micro businesses. That's just it's a given that you got to do that. The Premier Inn, the bottom end of Hamilton, is because it's not owned by the town centre, so that they can do reasonable rents. And also they built the Premier Inn because the land was purchased rather than leased, and that made it affordable. So I think there are big issues, and it's going to take a while to sort them out. And for my town, Blantyre, parking issues, I just agree with you. Parking issues, we've got the exact same issue. We could have solved it with the build of that White Elephant, the hub. We could put parking there, bigger set of parking, and that would have solved it, but we've never done it. So we are in limbo now, where we're going to have a lot of problems with parking in there as well. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, observations? Can I just say, Ian, in regard to the Bairds building, I don't think we handled that well when Wetherspoons paid £300,000 to the developer and we got £100,000 for a prime site. Wetherspoons own it. We were also advised by senior officers that Wetherspoons were working in the back of the building, which they weren't. We were then advised by senior officers that they couldn't build because of COVID, but we built a hotel down the Bolton Cross. So it's really quite worrying. the whole thing. Thanks very much for your report. Can we agree to accept the report? Thank you. Item 7, an application change of use of dwelling house short-term accommodation at 26 Shawburn Street. Report approved. Grant detail. Planning permission. Stephen Clark, planning team leader to speak to the report. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Short report for you, and I'll run through it as quickly as I can. This application is presented to committee this afternoon due to the number of representations received. Normally, officials of the department could deal with it under delegated powers. The property itself is an upper floor cottage flat at 26 Shawburn Street. It backs onto Burnbank Road. It's a cul-de-sac and it's surrounded by a number of similar type houses, notwithstanding the fact that the property immediately adjacent to it is a semi-detached property. I would emphasise that the property at the application site has off-street parking provision, one space associated with it. As highlighted by the Chair, the proposal is for a change of use of the two-bed cottage flat to a short-term let accommodation. No external alterations are proposed to the property. Section 3 of the report highlights the local plan status of the site in terms of applicable policies. It is a general urban area, and not surprisingly, residential use is the dominant use. Section 4 of the report goes on to detail the consultations that were undertaken, and I would highlight that my colleagues in Roads and Transportation have offered no adverse comments, and in a similar manner, Environmental Services have provided no objections. The 6 letters of representations are summarised in Section 5, and it's fair enough to say that parking seems to be the main issue that's been raised by those that lodged comments. There is a response to that in the report, but essentially, in purely simplistic terms, the proposal is very similar from a planning point of view in terms of normal residential occupancy, in that the house has potential to generate car parking demand, as is the short-term let. However, the advantage with this property is it does have one off-street parking space. Issues about safety, children playing, etc., etc. These are noted in the report, but on the balance of probability, issues relating to danger to children is due to a irresponsible driver rather than the actual use round about. There's also concerns raised about noise and disturbance. Again, I would highlight the property remains residential in use. Section 6 of the report provides the assessment and conclusion, and for the various reasons stated, the recommendation is to issue consent subject to the conditions that are listed at the end of the report. I'm more than welcome and happy to take any questions members may have.
Stephen, any questions, comments? Councillor Keats.
Thanks, Stephen. Just on the nature of the new property, is it a short let? Is that the correct terminology? Short-term let? And if so, what does that actually mean just for my own information?
Short-term lets, councillors, are an agreement between a company that usually owns it. It's usually a company, it can be individuals who will rent their property out to individuals or companies for a short period. It will stipulate, the agreement will stipulate it is for a week, 2 weeks, possibly 6 months, but they're always short-term lets and have a start date and a stop date, unlike other lets whereby if you let a property out, the tenant is in command of when they stop, whereas in this occasion the company or the individual is letting out for a certain period. As the report highlighted, we've been advised that this will be maybe let out to companies if they've got, employees coming up to Hamilton area and they need some residential accommodation. It's easier or more preferable than hotel accommodation, or it could be for people who have insurance claims for houses that they can't occupy and they would move there.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. That was very helpful. And just on the insufficient parking, a family friend actually contacted me about parking in the street, and I believe has further contacted Councillor Faulkner, and I believe that it is an issue in the area. It's certainly come to my attention, so that's probably one concern I would have reading the correspondence. It has been brought to my attention prior to this meeting that parking is an issue in Shawburn Street.
Okay. I agree with you there. It's been brought to my attention also. One of our home helps was bitten by a dog in the same street. It's very much in the news just now. Okay, can I'll... Sorry? Oh, sorry, Mary.
Stephen, did you want to? Yeah.
Councillor Donnelly.
No, so Stephen was just going to reply.
Oh, sorry.
Councillors, in terms of parking, I fully accept that in a cul-de-sac street where levels of car ownership are increasing as they are, nowadays it's not unusual for residential properties to have 2 cars and 1 car. And primarily the issue when I've been on site, and I've been on site twice having a look at this, is the fact that because of cottage flats, they do not have off-street parking provided. As a result, anyone that owns a car has no option but to park on street. When I was there, I also observed a number of vans. I don't know if these were workers who were visiting, doing work on properties, or it was residents who parked their company vehicle there. So I can't sit here and say that parking is not an issue. All I can say is that this proposal is unlikely to generate a parking demand greater than normal occupancy of a residential property, and this property has an advantage. It does have 1 off-street parking space.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I have got the concern of the parking in Shawsburn Street does have a parking problem. Maybe you didn't see it that day, but I have had in my inbox people saying that there's been congestion, especially, I think somebody couldn't get out with an ambulance one day, and that was quite serious. The other issue that I have in regards to Shawsburn Street is with the short-term let, which is, I don't know if it's in other areas, but it's certainly in Hill House, and that is with short-term lets. People are emptying the house when they're vacating the property, and they're just putting furniture or rubbish out in the street and not notifying, not using their 1 uplift or not notifying. So I would like the owner to have responsibility for that. That as an issue, that he couldn't do the people that did move into the house, but I am actually thinking of refusing this application.
Okay, any further questions?
Stephen, what do you want to come
Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Donnelly, I know what you say with regards to parking, but as I've got to emphasise, there's no proven implication that the use of short-term lets will result in more parking than if this property was just occupied by a normal household. So we've got to accept that. I have seen parking issues there. As I say, I went down twice and I've been there at 4. It was 4:30 one afternoon on the way home, and cars are parked indiscriminately at corners and all the rest of it. That's down to poor driver behaviour, rather than, say, for example, the use of this property for letting. I'm sorry to hear issues about the ambulance and the child, but again, bad parking by residents. With regards to litter and such like, it is vacated. The only thing that they should really be taking with them is their own personal possessions. And I would hope, and I'd expect reasonable people would not dump their own personal possessions in the street. So there's really hopefully no need to find, I think you said, rubbish in the street. Ultimately, however, it will be for the owner of the property and that management company to report that. And any littering can, of course, be reported to colleagues in environmental services.
Thanks for that. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for interrupting. Actually, you've answered my question, Stephen, because given that short-term let, I assumed it would be fully furnished. You know, if it's for a week or a fortnight, it's like an Airbnb type thing, for want of a different expression. Yeah, am I right in this?
I purposely didn't use that expression, Councillor MacDonald, because of the perception that the media can have of that type of, but it would be rented out on that basis. And to be honest and fair with you, they've not said it won't be used on that basis because they have admitted it could be used for tourists. The owner of the property is trying to maximise income, rental income, as most property owners would do in that situation, and therefore they'll take that chance. But even if it was occupied by tourists, there's no guarantee that issues would arise relative to noise or anything like that. As far as I am led to believe, it's furnished.
Okay, thanks for that. No further questions?
Councillor Carmichael.
Councillor Carmichael.
I'm on now. Should this plan and consent be approved, Stephen, would this be subject to a licence as well?
100% correct, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor, wrong name. Sorry, Andy. This is why we are getting more and more applications like this, because of the new licence provisions, which I think started in October last year and have to be fully complied with mid this year. And therefore, that's why these applications are coming to us. As I said earlier, most of them get determined under delegated powers and have received consent elsewhere, but this one had to be brought to committee because of the 6 representations.
Thanks for clarification of that. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly.
It is an Airbnb, are you saying? No. No. Right. Like an Airbnb. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Can I approve the report?
Second it.
And I now ask the committee to agree to approve the report. Okay.
So the motion will be...
The motion will be to approve the report. The amendment will be to refuse it. So we'll take the motion first, approve the report.
We're just going to launch the vote, Chair.
Sorry?
We just need to activate the vote for members.
Back to the old days, but the why not?
Okay, that's the vote now activated, Chair. So the motion is to approve the recommendations in the report and the amendment as proposed by Councillor Donnelly and seconded by Councillor Keat is to refuse the application. So the vote's now opened.
Right. Okay. All participated? Okay, got the numbers.
Are you? Oh, right, sorry. Okay, you were waiting on another 4 votes.
That's outside votes.
Just check in before we close the vote. We don't have everyone having voted, so just double check if we have had any technical issues. I don't think we've had any notification to the clerk's phone. Close the vote, yeah.
Take the vote if that's...
We'll just... That's the voting now closed. So we had 9 members voting for the motion, 3 for the amendment and 1 member abstained. So the motion is therefore declared carried.
Right, thank you for that. Item 8, community grant applications and warm welcome initiative. Councillor MacDonald, do you express an interest?
That's in the second.
Oh, sorry.
In the second part, Councillor MacDonald, was it the warm welcome initiative? Yes. Yeah, so we're okay for the first part of the report.
Okay. So where is the warm welcome there?
It's in the second part. So we're here. Those are just for noting.
Okay. Page 41. Oh. Slow this thing 8 community grants, sorry.
So we're starting.
8 community grants. Detailed sections 2.1.
We've also got an addition.
Okay. In view of the fact that this is the last meeting of the area committee in the financial year, the committee is asked to approve authorisation for the Executive Director of Finance and Corporate Resources, in consultation with the Chair, to approve any further community grant applications meeting the relevant criteria in the period to 31st of March 2023 from the 2022-2023 budget. Information on these grants awarded would be reported to a future meeting. Okay. The grants, advise the grants awarded to community and voluntary groups, organisations and Hamilton Area Committee in response to work. That's the following one. Okay, so that verbal update, we agree to Mary Conlon-Darnley.
Thank you, Chair. Since this is the last meeting and we've got 13,000 sitting in the kitty, can I move that every group that's put their ask in gets their ask?
I would be totally opposed to that as the Chair. Have you got a seconder, Mary? Okay.
So you move in.
I'll get a second. I'm moving.
The recommendations. on
I'm
the
moving the
report.
recommendations.
Okay, so we're going to go. So you're going to second the recommendations.
Okay.
Sorry, we're just going to go to a vote. So if I can just confirm that the motion proposed by Councillor Falconer and seconded by Councillor Razak is to approve the recommendations in the report for the 8 community grants, and the amendment proposed by Councillor Donnelly and seconded by Councillor Keat is to award the full eligible amount for each of the 8 community grants. So we're just going to launch the vote and we'll leave it open for a bit.
Did you? I've always wondered if that.
Few minutes.
Wi-Fi's down.
Right.
No, she can't.
She can't vote.
She can't vote. She's left a message.
We all voted?
Yeah. Okay, we had 6 members vote for the motion, 7 for the amendment and no abstentions, so the amendment is therefore carried.
Okay. I'll now repeat the verbal update. In view of the fact that the last meeting of the area committee in the financial year's committee is asked to approve authorisation for the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair to approve any community grant applications meeting the relevant criteria in the period to 31st of March 2023. I move that amendment.
Second it.
Or motion, sorry. Anybody otherwise minded?
So we're now going on to the warm welcome. So Councillor MacDonald, if you want to leave, these will just be taken on block as they're just for noting. Yeah, if you're declaring an interest, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So it's just to note those.
Right, page 41, item 2, the warm welcome grants. I propose we accept those.
Second it.
Anybody otherwise minded? Okay, that's agreed.
It's just urgent business.
So, There's no urgent business I've been made aware of, so thanks very much for your time. Declare the meeting closed.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Chair.
I think the whips want to see you. Stephen.